finally, let's delve into quality criteria for theories in the social sciences based on epistemological concepts. There are 4 core quality criteria that can be applied to social science theories generally. Yeah, so there might be additional criteria you can use in specific contexts or in specific theories, but these 4 are general. First one are general. First one has already been mentioned before, falsifiability. A theory that makes specific predictions and that can prove either correct or incorrect. A theory that bolsters against being proven incorrect by being unspecific or by being vague, being ambiguous, is deficient. A theory must be so concrete, so specific, that it can be falsified in a straightforward way if the predictions that it makes do not hold. The predictions must be clear, and we must identify whether an observation fits or doesn't fit the prediction. There's a German idiom that I'd like to cite here as an example of a non-falsifiable statement. It says in German, wenn der Hahn kräht auf dem Mist, ändert sich das Wetter oder es bleibt wie es ist. That translates to, if the rooster crows on the dunghill, it will rain or it will not. Right? So that is a so-called farmer's rule, but this is not a rule at all. You will easily recognize that it makes both predictions that are possible and so has no information value. So we see the rooster crowing on the dunghill and then we still don't know if it will rain or not. Or if the rooster doesn't crow on the dunghill, it can also rain or it cannot. There's no information included in this statement whatsoever. Right? So all possible outcomes are covered. It would be falsifiable if the or it will not part was left out. So if the rooster crows on the dunghill, it will rain. That's a perfectly suitable hypothesis, even though it's most likely false. But it's easy to show that it's false, and that means it's a good formulation of a hypothesis or a theory. So a hypothesis and a theory. Interestingly, if you've seen a TV show The Mentalist or have thought of horoscopes, astrology and these kinds of things, the techniques used in cold reading when you try to make predictions about the life course of people or take contact with or make meaningful statements about their past, that is often an example of nearly unfalsifiable statements about something. So have a look at the Wikipedia article about cold reading, and there you learn quite a lot about the tricks of making your statements unfalsifiable, and that's something that should be avoided at all times when it comes to scientific theories. Vagueness and non-falsifiability. Okay. Okay. Let's look at the second criterion, which is fertility. From a very limited number of core statements in a theory, we should be able to derive many interesting or helpful statements. So they logically follow from the core statements, or can at least inspire plausible conclusions that can be deducted from the theory, predictions that we again can test. Example would be that a theory that states that loud cries draw the attention of people around the crying person, that prediction may be correct, but it's not very fertile. There's not many other statements that you could derive from this. However, you could formulate a similar observation in a more productive way, and that is things that stand out in a social context draw attention in that context. We can derive the loud cries draw attention statement directly from this more general formulation, but we can apply it to other things that stand out as well. Fast movement, flashing lights, that have the same attention drawing effect. So this is a much more fertile statement, and each of these can be proven wrong, and then we can be more specific. Only fast movements and loud crying, but not flashing lights, have that effect. And so we learned something about the processes of drawing attention. Okay? Wrong, and then we can be more specific. Only fast movements and loud crying, but not flashing lights, have that effect. And so we learned something about the processes of drawing attention. Okay? Third criterion would be logical consistency or soundness. The various statements employed in a theory should not contradict each other, which sounds plausible, but it can happen quite easily. A fictitious example would be a theory, say, we call it universal happiness theory. It has two statements. All individuals derive happiness from achieving personal goals, and a second statement, personal goals are universally the same for all individuals. And we would conclude from these two statements that achieving universal personal goals will lead to happiness for everyone. However, there's an inconsistency. Statement 1 states that goals are personal, meaning that they vary between individuals. Statement 2 states that goals are universal, which says that they don't vary between individuals. And therefore, the phrase in the conclusion, universal personal goals, expresses this inconsistency quite clearly. What's a universal personal goal, right? Either it's universal or it's personal, you could say. And that is a problem if such logical inconsistencies plague a theory. That should lead to reformulation. And finally, a weakness of theories can be improper differentiation of normative versus empirical arguments. We should be clear on which statements have a normative and which have an empirical function or positive function. Both can play a role in the same theory, as I've emphasized in the session about normative and empirical statement or positive statements. Might become clearer with an example. Statement 1 would be that in a state, all inhabitants should have a say in the collective decisions of that state. That's clearly a normative statement. Statement 2 would be, in Norway, citizens below voting age do not have a say in collective decisions. That would be a positive statement. And from that, we would conclude that Norway is not a state. But of course, Norway is a state. And that's not because the two statements are untrue, but because the conclusion from them works differently. The conclusion would be correct if statement 1 was a definition rather than a prescription. If we treat normative statements as if they were positive statements, that wouldn't be that leads to erroneous conclusions. And definitions, as a definition, statement 1 wouldn't be very useful because it contradicts common usage of the term of state. That's a different story. So you should be aware which statements are normative and which are positive or empirical. And these 4 criteria, falsifiability, fertility, logical consistency, and differentiation of normative and empirical statements should universally be applied to each theory, and to varying degrees can render a theory inadequate.